One is greater if he causes someone else to do a mitzvah than the person does it itself. Obviously, I guess because it's a little harder to convince someone, you're motivated, you're self-motivated, fine, you can be motivated, but what about motivating someone else who's not motivated? You encourage someone else to do a mitzvah. It's a phenomenal schus, phenomenal. It's bigger than the guy that does it himself. So that's referring to regular mitzvah. And any mitzvah a person does, you cause someone else to do it, tremendous schus for that person who is the instigator, who's the inspirer, who's the facilitator. When it comes to learning Torah, it's even more than that. When you cause someone else to learn Torah, that's like, wow, it's way up there. You can't even count how chashuv it is. You can't imagine how chashuv it is. Even more than Talmud Rok Neged Kulam. A person who learns by himself, tremendous chus, cause someone else to learn. What can I say? Harvey, I'm jealous. I'm jealous. And I know Harvey forgot more than 17 years, not just as a parent in the school, but as someone who's been involved, who's been a ma'asa all the time, not just for this year. For this year, the credit is beyond belief. And we thank Harvey for that. The amount of Torah that people in this room and more people online, people who have been in the past, have gained from it, gotten from it. We thank Harvey for that. But just to add, the fact that Harvey's been a ma'asa when it comes to Shiva for many years, not just the last 17 years. Before that, the reason why Harvey got involved is because he's a ma'asa. He's someone who's been doing it. He didn't just start 17 years ago. He started, I know him for probably about close to 40 years. I think, something like that, probably about close to 40 years since a little when I came. He's always been someone, you call upon him, the yeshiva needs something, Harvey's there to help out, whether it's to help with the dinner, help with the campaign, whether it's to help with donors, individual donors, other donors, right? A lot of ways people can help out. And I think Harvey's is a role model for all of us. We should all be getting involved in Torah, and learning Torah, Habasas Torah, inspiration for Torah. And we want to thank Harvey on behalf of the yeshiva, on behalf of the shir itself, for what? Yeah, okay. On behalf of the yeshiva, and especially the Eishes Chal behind this, who will have to go out every single Sunday morning, right? It's also very special, right, Harvey? Am I correct?
Yes. Yes, so did I.
I saw Ms. Luckman. I said, so you're giving the shir today? I said, what are you doing here? I can't figure out why she's here, but she's here because she's the power behind the throne. She's the one who instigated it. So thank you, Harvey. Thank you very much, man. Everybody, including myself. I've never gone to a shir, but I've been inspired by the fact that the shurim are taking place every single week. And that's very special.
It here before.
I have it here.
It was your 5th shir.
Oh, really? Okay, good, great. Thank you. Anyway, thank you very much. Harvey, you should keep on doing things for Klal Yisrael, the community, for the yeshiva, for everybody. Amen. As you've done in the past, keep on being a ma'asa with such a powerful schus.
Now for a bubble. More bagels.
Somebody's watching. Uh-oh.
Okay, one other speech presentation. When, as an introduction to the share, when Harvey announced that this is going to be officially his last share, that he's chairman, guy who takes care of the coffee, everything, no one really thinks Harvey is fully retiring. He's still going to be part of everything. But, he wants to schlep a little less, okay? But, so we said, okay, we have to do something. We covered Harvey's retirement. So, Baruch Hashem, you see this beautiful setup, which credit goes to the people that care a lot about you. Berger, Mayorov, everyone really got involved in putting this all together. And it's an expression of everyone's feelings towards you. For my part, the question was, okay, so what type of share are you going to give the last share? So I got all types of suggestions. Someone sent me Mar Makomos on the halachas of hot air balloons. Nice. Okay, looked at it. Interesting. But I decided I'm going to give a share on the Rabbinical Oracle of Omaha. Now, we'll get to the Rabbinical Oracle of Omaha, but I think the title, moniker, the Oracle of Omaha, refers to a person, Mr. Warren Buffett, who is considered in America and the world as one of the greatest investors. I think they say his net worth is $160 billion. Person who started off Omaha, Nebraska, not in the bright lights big city of New York, started investing money, and he built up a portfolio that is currently worth $160 billion. And for that, they call him the Oracle, the Sage of Omaha. I think it's a good comparison to Harvey, to you. Now, Harvey, no one's asking you for a donation now. We don't think you have $160 billion. But you might be a better investor than Warren Buffett. Because when you started this share 17 years ago, there was definitely nothing like it in Florida, together with amazing dedicated efforts of Rabbi Sharfman Zatzal. The idea of getting Baal Batim, getting people from the community to come to rise early on a Sunday morning and come to a share, didn't just happen in a vacuum. I see how Harvey gets a new person to come to the share. Josh, you came to my Tekufa, right? He rubs shoulders with them. Next thing he knows, it's a little elbows. No, when you're coming. Even Rabbi Nyman this morning, he was going after a little bit. Do you have to come more to a share? Harvey invested in the share, and for that he deserves a lot of credit. And we know that an investment in a Dover Ruchni outlasts anything that's Gashmias. So you can invest and you can build up a big Fortune 500 company, the top Fortune 500 company, Warren Buffett's. But it's nothing in comparison to, as Rashi Rabbi Nyman spoke, to do something in Ruchnias, to do something for the community in Torah is a tremendous thing. And it's not just this community, the amount of people that watch this, you get comments from all over the world. It's really an amazing thing. And we felt we can't just do another Sunday, just a simple Sunday. So, Harvey, if we could call you up for a moment.
Here comes the speech, Harvey.
We asked our Sheshivas to come up. But on behalf of the yeshiva, the friends, they made this beautiful plaque. Yeshiva Torah's Chaim Torah's Emetz, Matzdike Ravim Kochachavim Lom Vad, presented with deep admiration and heartfelt appreciation to Mr. Harvey Lichtman for your decades of selfless dedication to strengthening the klal and raising the banner of Torah and Halacha even higher. The Rise and Learn weekly Halacha share, founded through your encouragement and run weekly through your efforts, serves as a testimony to your commitment to the community and to Hachzakas HaTorah. From the shir's beginnings, Rabbi Sharfman Zatzal, to its continued success with Rabbi Kier, you work tirelessly and enthusiastically to extend and deepen the yeshiva's impact in our growing South Florida Torah community. Gotta get through this. We are all fortunate to have you as one of the pillars of our yeshiva community. May your endeavors continue to have hatzlacha, and may the schus of all the Torah being learned each week at this share serve as a perpetual schus for bracha, hatzlacha, and good health for you and your entire beautiful mishpacha. Yeshiva Torah's Chaim Torah's Emetz, Rabbi Binyamin Luban, Rabbi Yisrael Y. Neumann, Rabbi Mordechai Palgan, Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Yaakov Kier, Rosh Kolam, Magid Shir, Beis Menachem of Tov Shin Pei Hey, July 27th, 2025. You're going to take on the coffee pot, so you have to take this one.
I'm retired, but Coca-Cola. Take a little extra time for that.
No, I'm watching the clock.
It's summer.
Okay, now that was the certain sense the main event, but so today's share we have two things to do. Number one is to present the last share of the season, but with that, I think this is something that Harvey was always very into. Is we have to vote and have the top 10 list of shiurim for this past year and a quick review. So we hope to do all that and finish within time. Good luck. Here we go. Today's share, entitled The Rabbinical Oracle of Omaha, is about a yid named Tzvi Hirsch Grodzinsky. Now, this Rav was somebody that, until I would say recently, he wasn't so well known. In the past, I would say 10 years, with the advent of Jewish history blogs and all types of untrained, no, careful what I say, but historians and the Indiana Joneses of the frum world literally go through archives and everything and anything to dig up. There's been, I think, a lot written on and quite a few things broadcast about this Chashav Rav. And it's very appropriate, Not everybody in their lifetime people appreciate to the fullest. But somebody that does something that really deserves an impact, HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes it that later generations learn about them. And that's something very interesting about this person, it's Tzvi Hirsch Grodzinsky. Just as a quick introduction, we try to give a few times a year a shir, which instead of just a shir being halacha and quoting halachic sources, we start the other way. Shir is focused on halachic source, and through his psakim, his writings, we try to get to understand this person better. So this Rav Grodzinsky, I think there's a lot to learn from. And I think the title, The Rabbinical Oracle of Omaha, is a good description. So let's begin a quick biological sketch. He was born in 1857 in Navardik, a city close to Navardik in Europe. Growing up, he learned with his cousin, Reb Chaim Ozer Grodzinsky. Given a share of Reb Chaim Ozer, called him the posik for the yeshiva world. Chaim Ozer was somebody that led the Torah world, even in a world with the Chavetz Chaim and other great Gedolim. Chaim Ozer was a Yoshev Rosh. He was the leader. This was his cousin. I think the Brisker Rav said, it could be his cousin was even greater than the famous Chaim Ozer. But he's less well known. Part of the reason he's less well known was in 1891, when he was in his young 30s, he decided to do something which was first started just a few years before that. He decided he's going to go to America. Now the first Rav from Europe to go to America was someone named Yaakov Yosef, RJJ, and it actually just was his yahrzeit, I believe last week. And if there ever was a tragic story, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef was that tragic story. How he came to New York and tried to strengthen Yiddishkeit, and he died of a heart attack. He died from a fight, fighting every inch to do it. It was just too tough. They say this story that Chaim Volozhiner predicted. in the late 1700s, right after the founding of the United States of America, the last stanza, the last stop in Jewish Galus is going to be America. And then he cried. And Talmidim asked him, why are you crying? He says, who knows how Torah is going to be built, how many karbanos will take for Torah to be built in America. And we'll see that was very appropriate, not just in New York City, but with Tzvi Hirsch Grodzinsky, who decided to take the job as a Rav in Omaha, Nebraska. Perhaps the reason he went to Omaha wasn't to be a cornhusker, but it was away from the big city of New York. Okay, sure he heard that Yaakov Yosef, it wasn't going easy for him over there. He figured out of town in Omaha, Nebraska, it would be a little easier. And so he arrived in these shores in 1891. If you look at the population, the Jewish population of Omaha in 1891, there were 2,000 people.
That's a lot.
2,000 Jewish people lived in Omaha. He was actually brought in, I believe, for a couple of shuls that were connected. By 1907, a few years, a decade, a little more than a decade after he came, the city doubled more than doubled in its Jewish presence. There were 5,000 people. By 1912, after he was already there for over 25 years, by 1912, the population was already 12,000 Jewish people. A renaissance, a birth. Omaha, Nebraska. I bet too many people don't have that on their list today of like, ooh, big Jewish communities. But in 1912, there were 12,000 Jews in Omaha, Nebraska, a community run by this Tzvi Hirsch Grodzinsky. He passed away in 1947 in Omaha, and he's buried in Omaha. But we'll talk about his life, talk about part of the tragedies of his life. That's his book, talking before the share. But what's the first point which we'll bring up, I think there's three fascinating aspects of this Rav, of his life, his psakim, his dedication. The first is the svarim that he wrote, and I'll talk about those in depth in a moment. The second one is the types of svarim that he wrote. He wrote svarim based on the needs of the community of the Jewish world, not just his community at that time. And his svarim tell a lot about where Judaism was in the early 1900s. And the third thing, which I found quite fascinating, is he paskin lahalacha, defining the times of how do you deal with a generation that had major nisyonos in Chol Shabbos. The psakim, which I think I found over here, are very unique, especially for those times, and quite amazing. So let's go one by one. In his lifetime, this Tzvi Hirsch Grodzinsky published 7 svarim. That is quite a lot for a Rav in America, those times, probably a lot really for anyone in the world. The first sefer he published, I want to quickly go through just to show, he published in 1898 a sefer called Mikveh Yisrael, or Hilchos Mikvos. Rabbi Luban just told me he has that sefer. I asked him, how did he get it? He told me it's not in print. He got it from his father. His father was a Rav. Rabbi Luban was born in Holyoke, Massachusetts. Also today you wouldn't call it the thriving Jewish community. But his father was born in Seattle and was a Rav in Holyoke, Massachusetts. Later it came to Queens. But that was a sefer still making the rounds of Rabbanim. We'll get to that in a moment. But that sefer was printed in 1898 in Chicago. Chicago had a Jewish printing press in 1898. His next sefer he published in 1916, Likutei Tzvi. I'll get to that in a second. But that he published in St. Louis. St. Louis's Hebrew Publishing Press. He published another sefer in St. Louis in 1923, Nili de Brachos. He published in 1936 a sefer Mikrei Kodesh on Hilchos Kriyas HaTorah. I'll get to some psukim from that sefer. Important stuff for Gabayim. He published that in East New York. Okay, that makes sense. Already in 1936, Brownsville. And finally, the last sefer he published in his lifetime, other sefer that he published, Chelik Bezes, was in 1945. He published the second Chelik of the sefer Nili de Brachos on Maseches Brachos in Omaha, Nebraska. By 1945, after the community we said already had 12,000 Jews, they had a Hebrew publishing company, press, and he published his last sefer in his lifetime. But besides, if you look on the left side of your Mar Makomos, the man was such a prolific writer. Besides all the svarim he published in his lifetime, he left over manuscripts upon manuscripts. What you see on the left side is his own handwriting. He didn't just write out a sefer, he designed the sefer. This is a sefer which was just published last year. I'll get to that in a moment. But the greatness of this writer, he had a beautiful handwriting, but he was so organized and orderly. He would write out, they said for each sefer he wrote 3 drafts of it. Make sure it's absolutely crystal clear. He says, you look through this Ksav Yad, they say there are no cross-outs, everything is crystal clear. Here he wrote a sefer on Hilchos Nida. The middle part are the halachos. The right side are basic perushim. And the left side is longer, bigger birurim. An entire sefer written out. No computers, no this. And set it up for, okay, all it needs is people to get involved with it, money, publish it, and boom, you have a sefer. He wrote a sefer, Likutei Tzvi. I was amazed by it. I tried finding all the svarim, whatever I can. Can't get your hands on a lot of them, but find them in databases. The sefer Likutei Tzvi is a Mar Makomo sefer on Shulchan Aruch. What it has is, it goes through the entire Shulchan Aruch, line by line. Shulchan Aruch, Magen Avram, Meshach, whatever. Each line, he brings you Mar Makomos you wouldn't find otherwise. This Shalos Tshuvas, that Shalos Tshuvas, this sefer on that Masechta, that sefer. And he was brilliant. So it's just, check out that sefer. So if you're learning the Shulchan Aruch, he'll give you Mar Makomos to check up. But then he came out with another chap. He's like, but I want people to know what that source I'm giving them, what does it do in reference to this line of the Shulchan Aruch? So he came up with a system that there's 7 different things a sefer could do referencing the Shulchan Aruch. And he made a whole key to it. Number 1, you could ask a Bekiyas Kasha. You could ask a question from somewhere else. 2, you could ask an Ian Kasha. It's hard to understand something. You could bring a proof to something, Shulchan Aruch or the Mefarshim say. You could answer a question that they have. You could give your haskama to what they say. You could explain what they say, or you could ask questions and answer what they say. I dare you to find an 8th different thing a sefer could do. But his clarity is like, okay, Svarim could do these 7 things. I'm going to make a key what each Mar Makom I'm quoting to you is going to do. And therefore, you flip through the sefer, you'll go through and you'll find out how to use look up this question. You have a question on the Shulchan Aruch, it's a good chance. Of a Kiyas Kasha, this is what the Sefer is doing. An amazing system to work through all of Shulchan Aruch. Now, really his Svarim have a pretty sad side to it. He himself had a massive collection of Svarim. And before his death, he was after old age of 90 years old. He planned until his dying day, his mind was fully with him, good health. He planned out the following. I have a collection of tens of thousands of Svarim in Omaha, Nebraska. Unfortunately, definitely by that point, we'll see in a moment, right? There wasn't much doing in Omaha, Nebraska. And he made a deal with a certain printing house in Israel that they would have rights, they'll donate his entire library, which is worth, even in those days, thousands and thousands of dollars, on condition that they also take his manuscripts and print his manuscripts. Within the Shloshim, they came from Israel, packed up his entire library, shipped it by boat to Israel, it's there today. But that publishing house never published a single one of his Svarim. I don't know why. Was it a monetary thing? They didn't have the funds to do it. They didn't have the authors. It's hard to understand. I don't know. But his manuscripts lay basically dormant for decades upon decades, until recently, people that are interested in this of Grodzinsky started going after them. Like Gvir from Muncie, who was very into Svarim, bought out the entire set of manuscripts. Now, even those manuscripts, not everything is there. Things were taken. Things were missing. That's where Indiana Jones comes in. They're searching for these lost manuscripts. I'll get to a story at the end. Remind me to tell a story, Josh. But from these manuscripts, recently they published, in the past 10 years, 3 new Svarim. Sefer Beis HaYayin, we'll get to soon. Halachas of wine, Yain Nesach, Avodah Zarah, Moedei Tzvi, Halachas of Yom Tiv, and Taras Yisrael. That's the Sefer we quoted over here from these manuscripts. So, okay, right now there are officially 10 Svarim. 7 he published in his lifetime, and 3 others. But there's room for dozens upon dozens more from these manuscripts. And there's a whole organization now trying to put out more and more of his Svarim. Maybe after this year, we get more popularity. We'll see. So, I think his Svarim definitely are very unique and definitely a major part of his legacy. Now, hit me one other interesting point. One of the sad points in history was after he was Rav there for over 30 years, about 1916. He was an old school European Rav, and we'll see some of his writings in a moment. And he spoke in Yiddish, and definitely talked to that generation that was there in Omaha when he came. But there were forces in Omaha that wanted a younger, more Americanized Rav. And they basically pushed him out. Now, as a Rav, that's obviously, you're someone who dedicated yourself. This house is open to the community for decades upon decades, and speak to people in the rabbinate. Unfortunately, this is not an old story, not just an old story. But he was basically, downsized. They brought him for something shiny and new. So what's he to do? Well, he was somebody that was always writing. So it hit me. Most of the Svarim, I believe, that he wrote afterwards were during this period, the last 30 years of his life, after he was retired. He didn't retire. You hear that? After he was retired, he didn't retire. He kept on writing and doing, And most of the Svarim were produced during this period, the last 30 years of his life. He published more and more Svarim, which is the legacy which he has today. I would say, there's a good chance had he kept being a Rav in Omaha, the whole time, he wouldn't have written or published as much as he had. And who knows if the legacy will still be there. How many Rabbanim existed in that time period, that people don't know of. One of the other people involved is a Yid from Silver Spring, Maryland, who grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. And he learned a little bit about this Rav, and he was shocked. There's a Rav in Omaha, Nebraska that produced Svarim? Really? And Hilgi Yid has dedicated his life to, starting this foundation to publish the Svarim. And he went around, he says it goes back yearly to his family's Kvarim. And he couldn't even find people that remembered where the Rav is buried. Go a few generations later, unfortunately, the community, the high point was the 12,000 they had, in 1910, whatever it was. It was downhill from there. And Baruch Hashem, what looked like the worst thing, that he faced early retirement in his 60s from the shul, gave him more time to write and publish, and really that's an amazing legacy that he has. People don't realize sometimes, Harbatzas Torah, you invest efforts. He was a Rav, he was paskening, he was doing for a community. You never know, really, this Harbatzas Torah you have in writing Svarim, that could be even bigger than your day job. Second aspect is he published Svarim which were very much needed for his times. I'll give an example. In the Hakdama to his Sefer Milui de Brachos, which is really on Maseches Brachos, he reflects on why he wrote the first Sefer that he published, the Sefer Mikveh Yisrael, which Ruben says he has a copy. If you look on the right side on the Marmakum, he writes the following. His writing is very, he writes bluntly. I'm reading from the fourth line. He says, Kashabasi Medinas America. I got to America more than 50 years ago. Matsasi Shabarova Yaros Aktanos, in most of the small cities. Their mikvahs, which they had in the city, were not done properly. Why? In these cities, they didn't have a chashav, a proper rav. You know who was running the city? The sheikhtim. True story, that's what he's saying. A community hired a shochet so they could have kosher food. Baruch Hashem, that much they had in early America. But once they have a shochet, he knows about Jewish laws. Let him be the Rav. And the shochet was building the mikveh. And he writes, they didn't know, they never even learned Hilchos Milko. Even they learned a little bit, they didn't know it well. These are the toughest halachas, even for Rabbanim. The Kolshkin, the Shochtim, and serving for Shochtim. They know Hilchos Shchita from their pamphlets. They don't know Shulchan Aruch. They're a little safer. They know a little Shlita. Long the Yordea feel Hilchos Shlita. They never learned Shulchan Aruch Yordea Hilchos Shlita. Kolshkin Hilchim is Gvos. And these are the people that are building mikvahs. He writes a few lines later. Most of these mikvahs that these people built were pasul midaraisa. And therefore, he said, that's why I decided to write and publish his first sefer, Mikveh Yisrael, to teach people the halachos of a mikveh, how to build a mikveh. The shochtim, they're destroying the place, blooding them all up. And look at that. You see from his Svarim, in one of his Svarim, he writes, there are so many Svarim, who needs more Svarim? So people write on Svarim, you need more? But he says, but there are areas that it is important to write on, that people don't know. And that's what he dedicated his time to. Another example, he wrote these interesting Svarim. He wrote the halachas of Kriyas HaTorah. Now, in the introduction, I saw, he brought a fascinating story, and the Hashkacha Pratis in past week's Parsha. The story he brings there is told regarding involved in Tzemach Tzedek. But one of the words in this past week's Parsha, when it talks about the Masos of the Jewish people, Midbar, it says, in the Yerusha, all the different things, the cities, it says Migrushehem, right? Talking about their lands and their open spaces. So in that particular spot in the Torah, it's spelled at the end with a mem. The Baal Kori noticed that mistakenly the Sofer wrote it with a nun. So it's spelled incorrectly, even though the mem and the nun are interchangeable. And that same word is spelled in yesterday's parsha with a nun also. So the Rav who got the Shaila, Paskin, it's okay. So Grodzinsky writes,
what does it's okay mean? Does that mean you don't have to go back and lane again, but you still have to fix the Torah? Or is it okay and just leave the Torah as it is?
So we'll go through the Hope Sock. Good point. Now, what he said, why did this come about, is a lot of times, these are the toughest halachas. You're the Rav, the Gabbai notices it, the Baal Kori notices something here, hundreds of people in the shul, Shabbos morning, it's Rosh Chodesh, it's a double parsha, there's a lot of pressure going on, right? The Rav, I have a long speech I want to be able to give over. So you're pressed to paskin. So he says a lot of times you'll come with the wrong psak. Well, then you'll try to find things later to support your psak. But he says, wouldn't it be better if you had all these halachas crystal clear in front of you, that in case the question comes up, you'll be able to look quickly in a sefer and find it? So that's his sefer Mikrei Kodesh. He goes through halachas. I'll show you a few interesting halachas. One thing he brings there, I take this personally because I was a Gabbai for many years. He says the Gabbai has to know well the halachos of Kedima. Who gets first? There's a yurtzeit, there's a bar mitzvah boy. There's one extra aliyah you could give out, and somebody had a boy in shul, and somebody had a girl. Who goes first? Very interesting. On that particular halacha, he brings down the Yishomim. You know who goes first? The guy who had the girl. Right? Now, what he does in the Sefer, he writes the halachas in short. In the bottom, in the back, he has biurim explaining. So, I don't have the full Otzar Chachma, I just have the first 50 pages. I was able to track down the first parts of the halacha, not the second. But, so I assume the pshat is because getting the aliyah for the girl, he's going to be naming her. So, okay, should do that with an aliyah. As opposed to the boy, that Bezhashem will be named by the bris. So the father of the girl gets kedima over the father of the boy. He talks about Gabbayim should be very careful when they call people up for aliyahs. They should pronounce a person's name correctly. Interesting halacha, right? By us, we don't necessarily do this, but he says it's important you should wear, the Ola should wear a talis even by mincha. He brings down there. But I chose a few different halachas in Hilchos Kriyas HaTorah. He wrote the Sefer because he saw Rabbanim, there was a need for it. It's interesting. He was a Rav in Omaha, Nebraska, but he got around, especially in the later years when he wasn't the official Rav and wasn't making a salary from the shul. He would travel to Sacramento, California. He used to do over there, produce wine over there. Napa Valley, right? He was involved selling matzos, different things, different spots across the Midwest, the West Coast, all over. So we saw a lot of these little cities. There were conventions. He says, actually, interestingly, there was a convention of Rabbanim that was in New York at the time of the death of Rabbi Yaakov Yosef. And he himself was one of the Maspidim at Rabbi Yaakov Yosef's Levaya. And so Shkocha Pratis, all the Rabbanim were there, at that time. But they got around, he saw other Rabbanim, and he saw the needs. He saw people don't know the Hilchas Mikvos, I'll write a sefer on that. He saw people don't know a Rav needs Hilchas Kriyas Torah well. I wouldn't be surprised if his main target when he wrote these Svarim was more for the Rabbanim of his time than it was for the regular lay people. Fortunately, probably most of the people in Omaha, Nebraska were not able to really read his Svarim. Mentioned already that, okay. And the third aspect, and this I find quite amazing, is in the Sefer Beis Hayayin, which was recently published. So there, he's going through the halachas of Yayin Nesach. Right? We know the halachas, if a guy touches your wine, it's invalid. And there's a certain uncomfortable halachas. Who's considered a guy? Or maybe put it this way, who's not considered a Jew? And again, these are not so comfortable, tough halachas. Nowadays, before I read to you what he writes, a lot of this, we would say, for the most part, is not operable, because we consider most irreligious Jews, unfortunately, we call them as tinuk shenishbas. They're like children held captive. They're the real hostages of the generation, because they never had a Torah education. And therefore, they don't have these stringencies of not being considered a Jew. But tinuk shenishba has a din of a Jew. You may not know halachas, you can't rely on them for halachas, but we don't consider them the other side of the equation. He was talking in a generation where the starting point was they came from Europe okay, they're not going into Europe, there are people that went off too. But the early generation that was in America, most of them came from. But over time, they had struggles with Shabbos. So halachically, I have not seen this psak anywhere else. I think it's an amazing thing. He defines there's 3 different halachic categories for the Jews of his time who were not keeping Shabbos. Obviously, a Jew keeps Shabbos, full-fledged Jew. The question he dealt with is, what about people, it was happening in Omaha, Nebraska, it was happening in New York City. If you wanted to make parnasa in America in the early 1900s, how are you doing it? He was in America by 1890 already, 1891. If you didn't work on Shabbos, you needed to find a new job on Monday. So there are amazing stories of people that, they kept on switching jobs, not so pashut. But he basically categorizes 3 types of people. He says you could have a Jew that really started off but Lamaisa, he needs to support his family. And he takes a job on Shabbos. And it bothers him a lot. The rest of Shabbos he keeps. He comes home, he has a Shabbos Suda. And they'll be embarrassed if they would see the Rav. They sneak out to go to work. Them favorably. Why? They're considered, Ksuba's term, anusim machmas mamon. Rabbi, what are you saying? A monetary pressure is not an excuse. I see they believe in Shabbos. They're just doing it for parnasa. Isn't the simple halacha, if you machal Shabbos for a benefit, then you have this din of a nachri. They view it as an ones. They view that they have no choice because they want their family to starve. And the Mara Heter, that owners Rachmana Patre. He says, right? You can trust your shchita, and and he says you should judge them favorably. However, he gives two other categories of people. Then he gives other people that once they're Mechal Shabbos, for Parnasa, what happens when they strike it rich and they really have enough money that they could take off a day of the week and they'll still have enough money for their family? But you know what? Your business is going well. It's hard to say, Money is money. So he says, unfortunately, these people, they in their house they keep Shabbos, and he says beferish, they're not turning on a fire on Shabbos. In their house they're keeping Shabbos, but outside their house they're going to work every week, even after they have enough money that they can really stay home on Shabbos. He says, unfortunately, these people you have to categorize the other way.
It's not taking off the day because if you take off Shabbos, you're taking the whole week off. It's tired.
Well, he's not arguing that. It sounds like, let's say you have your own business and you're doing well and you could afford to take off Shabbos without the ramifications. So he says, those people I can't judge the same way. And he says, and certainly people that once they were Mechal Shabbos, they're smoking on Shabbos, full 9 yards. He says, that's simple, that's pashut. Yeah. But I think the groundbreaking psukim that he's giving on this, again, in today's world, for the most part, this is not relevant. But it was very relevant in his time. And you see the psukim that he's giving in halacha is somebody that was a giant in Torah, and he saw the destruction of what is America in those days. And, he paskined the halachas which were needed for those times. So, in conclusion, I think this Ritzi Hirsch Grodzinsky was somebody that probably for sure the second part of his life in Omaha, Nebraska was not appreciated fully who he is. And might have done a lot to build up Torah from 2,000 to 5,000, 12,000. But for the most part was forgotten in that community. But the legacy of his Svarim, that he specifically wrote for issues in his day, and its clarity. Here you see from a psak halacha, this last idea, a definition, not just a psak halacha, but a definition of what was going on to Jews in their times. How do you define what Chilul Shabbos is based on for these people? Is something which is an amazing, amazing legacy. I'll end off with one story. In the Hakdama to this Sefer, they bring an amazing story. If it wasn't written down, and if you didn't hear it firsthand, it would blow your mind. But the Yid, who's the head of this organization that's trying to print this Svarim, I should quote his name. His name is Rav Meir Yehuda Vakshalag, Myron Wakshlag, from Silver Spring, Maryland, wonderful community. So he says, this story happened 5 years ago. Again, we said that a lot of his manuscripts were bought and they're working on, but there's a good amount that people got their hands on. And there's one manuscript that was in someone's house. It seems, I'm not sure if that person was actually working on publishing that manuscript. But basically, there was a fire in Yerushalayim, and it burnt down many houses. He says the only thing that survived this house, the fire and the smoke, was the bookcase which contained these manuscripts.
Wow.
the person says that to me, it was 15,000 pages. He had 15,000 pages of manuscripts from Grodzinsky. That was the only thing that survived the fire.
The rest of the library was lost.
Huh?
The house.
The rest of the library.
No, not this person's individual house. He was housing 15,000 pages. So he writes, I knew Rav Grodzinsky was a gadol, but when you see that Min HaShamayim, one thing that survived was his manuscripts, obviously HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants that this Torah survives not just Omaha, Nebraska of the early 1900s, but survives the decades. If it lasted that long, ain't going down now. And really, I think it's an amazing thing to learn from of people's efforts. Many times people think, they toil in vain, and it's not true. The schosim and the legacy really lives on. That concludes officially the 17th year of the Sunday morning Rise and Learn share. Not counting today's share, which is the 34th of the year, we had 33 other shiurim. So we'll always get late ballots later. We'll count them like they do in Philadelphia. But I'll tell you what was compiled so far. Baruch Hashem, a lot of enjoyable, interesting shiurim. Number 10 of the top 10 list was the LA fires. Who is halachically responsible? Right? The fires are burning down LA. So went through the halachas. What is if somebody burns down someone else's thing? He starts one little fire and it spreads. So how much responsibility halachically does that person have for all those fires? That was number 10. Number 9, the exemption of mitzar b'sukkah. Here in Florida, we always have, anywhere you have, the potential for mitzar. In Florida, we have our own set. From rain to bugs, important halachas involved in that. Really, a share like that, I piggybacked Rabbi Sharfman's share. Rabbi Sharfman gave a share about mitzar and a sukkah. Right? I think Rabbi Sharfman was smart enough to talk about the AC issue.
You hadn't really become ready yet.
Yeah. Number 7. This is one of the halachic personalities, Rav Ruderman, Psakim from the Bucky of Baltimore. Actually, just this past week, I was with one of Rav Ruderman's top Talmidim, Tzvi Berkowitz, Rosh Hashiva in Eretz Yisrael. I was actually discussing with him some of the Psakim from his Rebbe Rav Ruderman. People didn't realize Rav Ruderman was a posek. That was number 7. Number 6, a new... I have to be careful. I have people in the audience here. But the title of the shir was Reb Shaila, I'll use the word mice, and halacha. Right? The stories of Reb Shaila, how, I think we did it on Reb Shaila's Yerzeit, how he chased away the mice from one guy's warehouse to someone else's. Halacha responsibility for doing that. Number 5, just this past week, a few weeks ago, we did the Rivos Ephraim, the wonder of a posek and day school Rebbe. I found out afterwards, Robert Moskowitz, who's been listening to the shir for years and years, said he passed the shir around the MBH Kol. So in there, one of the people, Kol Yigalite, is Moshe's great-grandson. And one of the psakim we quoted, Rivos Ephraim, was a Talmud or Moshe, and he quoted that started off prohibiting chult on Thursday night. That was a very important share to save. Number 3, Harvey, this is your fault. The Aron Kodesh and Halacha was spurred on by Harvey sending me a picture, a video of, what was it, the $8 million Aron Kodesh, right, in Rishon LeZion. So we talked about Aron Kodeshes and Halacha. We also got a spin-off from that. We did the Sefer Torah and Halacha. That was number 3. Final 2. Number 2 was at Rav David Feinstein Seder. We talked a lot about David Feinstein, the Lower East Side. Someone came up to me later from the Lower East Side, said, you defined the community well, which when you're not part of the community, as an outsider, that's the ultimate, you're nervous when you talk about other people's communities, get into trouble, but they were happy, okay? I still don't talk about Washington Heights, it's a different level. I'll leave that to others. And number one, Josh, this is your vote for sure. Number one was the Rabbi Neumann files on Rabbinical of Kamenetsky. We were able to get access to Rabbi Neumann's notes from over the years and reviewed some of the stuff that he had on Rabbinical of Kamenetsky. But it comes out, I believe we're up to, today was the 529th share. So when you do top 10, it's not fair, top 10 out of 33, but 529, and the only reason why we stand anywhere near that unbelievable number, is due to the efforts of both Rabbi Sharfman, Zatzal, Baruch Chaim, and Harvey for being able to do so much. Who would have thought when he started the share back then? Ask Rabbi Sharfman if her husband thought how long this would go. A trial, right? So here they are, 529 later. I guess it's still in trial. But thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Not just today, everyone for watching. And B'ez Hashem, we should all celebrate and learn much, much together.
Amen.
It should be a success for everybody.
If I could just say for a minute.